Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Happy Saturday. This is a new live emergency weather briefing as the threat of tornadoes increasing across portions of northeastern Pennsylvania to northwestern New Jersey. Also, portions of interior New York could also see that increase in tornado threat. And of course, it still looks like there is the chance of a tornado outbreak Monday through Wednesday from central and eastern Texas on Monday. Then Tuesday, it looks like that ejects across portions of eastern Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas, a large part of central and southern Mississippi. The latest NAM shows the instability only making it up to about central and northern Mississippi, at least in the latest model run. But I do think that there certainly is a chance that that instability could rocket all the way up into central Tennessee. And then the threat pushes to the east, southeastern U.S. on a Wednesday. Looks like the threat of potentially significant severe weather could head for your location as well. This is the latest low-level jet loop. This is on Monday. Watch that low-level jet just blossom there across north central Texas into central Texas, and then it ejects across the lower Mississippi River Valley. Even though the low-level jet reaches all the way up into central Oklahoma, the instability is going to make it up to about the DFW area, maybe up to the Red River. And even though it looks like a relatively simple target area, there are multiple target areas within that severe weather threat. You could play the dry line. Supercell storms could initiate along the dry line to the west of the low-level jet axis, or could also play prefrontal confluence lines off to the east. But first, I want to talk about the threat of tornadoes today across the interior northeast, and that does include Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, the Scranton area, right in the middle of the risk area. And right now, dew points are rocketing up into the 50s. Definitely is the likelihood of severe storms that are going to be initiating a pretty dynamic system also. This is the same system that we have been tracking for quite some time. This is the latest HRRR convective evolution showing supercell storms initiating by the early to middle afternoon hours, first across central Pennsylvania into central New York, moving rapidly off to the east. And then you can see that threat of renegades developing into eastern Pennsylvania. Those track toward northwestern New Jersey. That's the mode that excited this development, this upgrade up to a 5% tornado probability. It's that cluster of renegades moving through eastern Pennsylvania up through northwestern New Jersey. So that's what we're really going to focus on. We're also going to focus on the threat of tornadoes further north, though, across east central New York. I still think that even though dew points aren't going to be quite as high up there, that the threat of tornadoes is relatively uniform across the entire green blob. So now let's take a look at the HRRR model in greater detail. And we'll look first at the moisture and the surface-based instability. This is the 0 to 1 kilometer EHI, which is a composite index that factors in surface-based instability and 0 to 1 kilometer wind shear. You can start to see this surface-based environment begin to develop across eastern Pennsylvania. The greatest surface-based instability, this is about 22Z, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, starts to lift northward through east central Pennsylvania, central New Jersey as well. And there's that environment starting to peak. It peaks a little bit later, around 6, 7 p.m. across central and northwestern Pennsylvania. You can see an arc of surface-based instability co-located with some stronger wind shear as well. These holes within that environment show fast-moving, potentially bands of storms and also surface-based supercells. But this is a pretty favorable environment that moves up toward northwestern Pennsylvania. Once we're done looking at this setup in the northeast, then we're going to focus on the potential tornado outbreak on Monday through Wednesday of next week. This is at 21Z, about 5 p.m., an arc of likely severe storms across western New York into northeastern Pennsylvania, maybe some embedded tornadic circulations within this. And then the renegades start to develop down near southeastern Pennsylvania, lifting up through the east central portion of the state. That's 5 p.m. right there. 6 p.m. Supercell marches into the northwestern portion of New Jersey by about 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Meanwhile, this arc of embedded supercells and more linear storms across eastern New York moving through, likely still snow on the ground across the mountains of the Adirondacks, the higher terrain across the northern Appalachians. So you could see a shelf cloud, severe weather moving across snow-covered terrain later on today across the upstate New York, as well as this band of convection. And then this one with the greatest tornado potential, this mode across east central Pennsylvania into northwestern New Jersey. You could see a southwesterly low-level jet banking right up to that mode of storms. Then a weakness in the 850 flow, and then you have stronger wind shear ahead of that arc as well, further to the north. A lot of times these setups in the northeast can be a little bit more complicated, but you can see that as we progress to 0Z, 8 p.m., the low-level jet actually accelerates from east central Pennsylvania across central northern New Jersey into New York State. So you got to wonder if those supercell storms are going to continue all the way to the Big Apple. There's the supercell storms across northern New Jersey. 1Z, they start to peter out at about 9 p.m. finally. So it looks like the HRRR weakens those storms on approach to New York City, but still could be a chance that they make it all the way to the Big Apple and are able to hold together with that intensifying low-level jet. Low-level thermodynamics, about 69 over 57, a bit of an elevated mixed layer coming in. It's early spring, so this definitely is quite unusual for the Northeast. Photographs look quite straight line, especially as you get closer to the inflow region of that storm. But if you take a forecast sounding in the middle of that EHI blob that's lifting off to the north, then you start to get a photograph that is supportive of an isolated tornado threat. 68 over 61. Dew points will rise into the lower 60s there, surging north through central New Jersey, east central Pennsylvania. A little bit of a dry slot aloft. Steep lapse rates as well. The rate at which that red line decreases with height represents the lapse rates. In the photograph, you have a due southerly wind just shy of 10 knots, and then a 1 kilometer wind south-southwest at 40 knots, and that with a little bit of directional shear in the upper levels. Your right mover is more of a due southwest to northeast storm motion. And with that further right storm motion, you're definitely able to carve out more favorable photographs within that environment. See this little blob, that gray blob of non-zero 0 to 1 kilometer EHIs, or energy helicity index, lifting north through east central Pennsylvania, central New Jersey as well. That's going to be the threat for tornadoes later on today. And I also want to break down the tornado outbreak on Monday and Tuesday, of course. Definitely could be potential. Let's look at the dew points really quick here across the Northeast, and then we're going to pivot over to Monday. Here's the dew points rising up to near 60 across central New Jersey, east central Pennsylvania. If these meet up with that arc of renegades coming out of southeastern Pennsylvania, then I do think that there's going to be a couple tornado warnings with those storms as they eventually will slide into northwestern New Jersey. This is likely due to some evaporation, some rain falling on the ground, helping to enhance those dew points behind where those storms are able to track. But just to the southeast, look at that, the dew point temperature is rising up to just near 60. That's the clean environment across central New Jersey. It's a pretty sharp, potent trough. It's relatively small, but the trough is moving through western New York right now. The belt of strongest bulk shear is off across southeastern, east central Pennsylvania into northwestern New Jersey as well. And a little bit of some left exit action with that nose of the jet streak poking up into the mid-Atlantic should be enough to initiate those renegades across southeastern New Jersey or southeastern Pennsylvania. Also, you have this front marching through eastern Pennsylvania. Winds shift over to a westerly direction behind it. That's going to be enough to initiate these storms as well. But I think that the renegades are going to fire because of that left exit. They'll probably fire off the terrain and then move rapidly off that frontal boundary. Could fire off the terrain, could fire off of the frontal boundary as well. Looks like they fire that storm off the higher terrain. A little bit of a confluence line is analyzed, though, across southeastern Pennsylvania. You shift to a more southwesterly direction. Due southerly surface winds just to the east of that. The front lags behind just a bit with those westerlies. But I do think that the lift from the left exit region, a little bit of a subtle prefrontal confluence line, is going to be enough to fire that supercell storm across southeastern Pennsylvania. This mode is going to be more damaging wind, but there is a 2% tornado threat as well across central and eastern New York, even though those storms are going to be developing first. And then it starts to fluff out as it moves into the northeast. It's definitely an event to keep a very close eye on. And now I'm going to pivot on over to the Southern Plains and that big trough ejection that is anticipated on Monday. I know we use the term ejection a lot, non-stop here at Team Dominator headquarters. About to go on about a 10-mile run here, I hope. Try to keep everything centered and organized between the ears. So here is the trough. It's in California right now, diving southward. A lot of flow on the backside, suggesting that it's still amplifying. Latest model trends are definitely with a deeper trough ejection Sunday into Monday. Rather than that bowling ball, it does look like kind of a skinnier trough being analyzed by the NAM. The vortex, though, dropping into northern Mexico, definitely reduces the amount of snow that is going to fall across Colorado with that shape and that deeper trough diving way to the south. The earlier GFS models were showing a vortex lifting up through the east side of the trough and then anchoring up across east central Colorado. And that's what led to those prolific snowfall totals. But now the egg starts to come a little bit further south, down into New Mexico, instead of lifting up north and pivoting within that upper level trough. The bowling ball just dives into the southern plains. That is a very favorable setup for big severe weather across central and eastern Texas, especially where those upper level winds are a little bit more westerly aloft. They're more meridional to the north of DFW and also up into Oklahoma. If this system were ejecting during April or May, it'd be even a more substantial tornado outbreak. I still think this is going to be quite a substantial tornado outbreak. Central Texas, especially where those upper level winds have a more westerly component and possibly pushing into the piney woods. I see a couple of different target areas as well. And then the latest NAM ejects this trough, and it still has this neutral tilt. It's not shearing out at all, despite the anticyclone holding firm off the southeastern U.S. So that is a trough ejection that favors a substantial tornado outbreak across parts of the Mid-South. Some of the models are showing that the instability axis only makes it up to about central Mississippi. But if that instability axis makes it all the way up into Tennessee and Kentucky, then the outbreak certainly would favor there as well. This is Tuesday at 0Z. Big low-level jet as well. Look at that down in Mississippi. And I still think that pivot point where it shifts from a due southerly direction to more southwesterly, somewhere in central Mississippi, likely to have strong, violent tornadoes. And then the system ejects to the east, and portions of Georgia, South Carolina, northern Florida are going to have a major tornado potential on Wednesday. So there's the big low-level jet ejection into Mississippi. The tornado threat, strong tornado threat, begins across central Louisiana. It'll probably be ongoing on Tuesday morning, but this is at midday Tuesday. Central Louisiana looks like a threat of strong, violent tornadoes. I pulled a bunch of PDS tornado soundings down there across central and southern Mississippi, and that's going to push into Mississippi during the afternoon hours on Tuesday and through the evening. The low-level jet expands and ejects into western Alabama as well. The perfect timing is still up for debate and still definitely changing, but a lot of the models agree on this multi-day tornado outbreak, multi-day significant severe weather. Even the GFS is in agreement with the NAM and the European model, poking that into Mississippi. And look at that in Texas. Monster low-level jet down in central Texas as well, with the nose of that low-level jet going all the way up to the DFW area. But I think we're going to have to decide in Texas whether to play storms that develop on the dry line to the northwest and to the west of DFW that might be a little bit west of the wind shear, or position off to the east with an ejecting low-level jet that's going to move rapidly into the Texas piney woods. Likely there is going to be a couple of different modes, 2 different targets. The Lockett, Texas day was kind of like this as well. Remember that day last year in late April. Lockett, Texas was not dissimilar to this. You had a nose of instability with a little bit lesser low-level wind shear, but greater directional shear all the way up to these storms that would develop on the main dry line in an arc from DFW all the way to the northwest. Or do you target these renegades off across eastern Texas, deeper into the low-level wind shear, deeper into the low-level jet axis, a 60 to 70 knot low-level jet across the eastern Texas piney woods? I think that that's the play. these storms that move into East Texas as you go through the late afternoon and the evening hours, those I think are going to have the threat of strong, violent tornadoes with a 70-knot low-level jet. Even though the 3-kilometer NAM does look messy within this strong warm advection happening within the low-level jet, the elevated mix layer is carving into the western gradient of these prefrontal confluence lines, and I think it's going to make it all the way there, and you're likely going to see embedded supercell storms across the Texas piney woods. Reminds me a lot of that day in Van, Texas, where you had a violent tornado come through relatively late with these prefrontal beans across East Texas. These out here to the northwest, across northwestern Texas, are going to be largely hailers. They're out near the core of that cold blob of air aloft. And these are going to be major hail producers developing right on the leading edge of that 700 millibar cold blob, pushing into that zone. And then this warm advection, these bubblers will develop off to the east along prefrontal confluence lines. And these are likely going to have the potential of strong, violent tornadoes. See these develop just to the east of DFW, Canton, up toward the Paris area. You have prefrontal confluence lines down to the northwest of Houston as well. These are going to be dangerous supercell storms. Probably will pull a bunch of PDS soundings in here. At the very least, you have a massive hodograph. Lots of easterlies, a very backed low-level jet with that trough ejection. Elevated mix layers coming in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. 0 to 1 kilometer shear in excess of 600. So that is about as textbook of a hodograph as you can get. Look at that for strong, violent tornado potential. Very kinematically favorable environment here. Relatively meridional storm motions, but I think that if you go a little bit further south in east central Texas, you'll start to get more southwest to northeast storm motions, and that'll even carve out even greater wind shear. You could definitely see southeasterly surface winds, elevated mix layer coming in on the western edge of that gradient. There you can see the elevated mix layer. See where that green line separates a bit from the red line? These are dry slots in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And that classic elevated mix layer is going to be encroaching on the western edge of those prefrontal bubblers, those convergent lines across East Texas, and certainly is going to develop a strong, violent tornado potential across East Texas. All of these are going to be supercell storms. More bubblers developing northwest of Houston, maybe even down to the east of Houston. Looking at a sounding ahead of those storms, you can see these are purely going to be maybe even slightly elevated supercells. They'll probably be surface-based, real similar to those hailers that develop to the west and southwest of the Oklahoma City metro. They'll probably have big hook echoes. They'll be dropping big hail. Still a lot of directional shear available to these storms as well. But I think that it's pretty obvious that the target is going to be further south. Possibly another band, though, coming into the DFW area. Still more straight line hodographs, more of a hail threat with this line of storms. But it's these renegades that develop near and to the east of DFW, especially east of DFW by late afternoon across the Texas piney woods, that really have my eye down there for a potential tornado outbreak. Then we'll shift on over to the regular NAM and show you this outbreak across the Mid-South, lower Mississippi River Valley. Here's your convective line. Likely will have tornado warnings, strong, violent tornadoes producing damage by this time. This is midday on Tuesday with that convective line marching through Louisiana. The main convective line near the Sabine River. Even the regular resolution NAM is showing these renegades developing through eastern Louisiana, approaching the Mississippi River, right on the east, right in the heart of that low-level jet blob. 50 to 70 knot low-level jet developing. PDS tornado soundings all over the place by Tuesday midday. EHIs through the roof into central Louisiana. Anywhere you click, you're going to find a PDS sounding out here. So let's take a second and look at this sounding in hodograph. Absolutely textbook, strong, violent tornado hodograph. 1 kilometer wind approaching 70 knots out of the due south. Your surface wind due south at about 18 knots. That creates about 50 knots of bulk shear within that layer between the surface and 1 kilometer. A lot of directional shear between the 1 kilometer wind and aloft, the mid-levels, 3, 4, 5, 6 kilometers up, southwest to northeast certainly. And this is a massive hook-shaped hodograph 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative felicity, almost near 500, just shy of 500. A ton of directional shear, a lot of instability too, even though it is relatively saturated by midday. Still 73 over 69, a ton of surface based instability, deep cape all the way up, very deep, thick cape for springtime. Surface based cape analyzed at modeled at 2200 with that sounding. Definitely big instability expanding across southwestern Mississippi as well. PDS soundings all over the place, even more low level cape as well, suggesting an environment that's going to favor the development of renegades moving into southwestern Mississippi with strong, violent tornado potential. 0 1 kilometer winds are over in this quadrant, a little bit of an easterly component. So this is looking like a major tornado outbreak here. It looks like the instability doesn't make it all the way even to Memphis in the latest NAM. It gets shunted here in central Mississippi, but that would still be very favorable environment from central Mississippi down through southeastern Louisiana, including Jackson down to New Orleans, down through the coastal regions of Mississippi as well. That's the convective line pushing through central Mississippi. Right now, the NAM is suggesting a little bit more linear north of the instability axis, and then right where those 850 winds shift from more meridional to a slight southwest direction, right near this pivot point, that's where I think that the threat of strong to violent tornadoes is absolutely maximized. Due southerly winds shifting to a slight southwesterly direction. You can see how this boundary is more north-south across central and northern Mississippi, and then it shifts back to a southwesterly direction. That pivot point, you always want to look for the pivot points within these boundaries. That should be relatively effective at initiating renegade supercell storms that'll move off that elbow into the deeper wind shear. Strong, violent tornado potential, almost a certainty if this pattern evolves like this. East Texas will probably intercept strong, violent tornadoes there across eastern Texas. And then we'll pivot to the east across Mississippi. And then this is going to shift all the way to the southeastern U.S. on Wednesday. So 3 days in a row, not dissimilar from that super outbreak in 2011, which was the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th. 4 days in a row. Classic, progressive, energized, consolidated polar front jet stream. Multiple days of severe weather in a row from west to east across the U.S. We've been recognizing the potential for this the entire winter into the spring with our year 2 La Nina, cold PDO, warm blob in the North Pacific. So it looks like it's here. This is a substantial tornado outbreak, likely going to happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday across the southeastern U.S., portions of southern, central, and southern Georgia, maybe even the Carolina Piedmont as well. And we are breaking down this threat live this morning. I'm in Norman, Oklahoma, so I'm waiting on this event. Of course, I'm going to be activating full-blown storm chase mode for this one. Trying to hydrate. That's the hardest part at this age, is staying hydrated. And we do have this blob that's going to be evolving. Very cold blob of air aloft, maintaining its very deep amplitude as it ejects across the lower Mississippi River Valley. Definitely the greatest threat of a tornado outbreak that we have seen in some time, probably since middle of March last year when we had those couple of high risks across Dixie Alley. I do anticipate similar evolution here across the southeastern Great Plains and then across Dixie Alley and then across the southeastern U.S. So thank you everybody for joining me for this weather report. There is a threat of tornadoes today as well across the Northeast. We broke it down earlier in this live. The Storm Prediction Center has upgraded that threat to a 5%, really anticipating the development of those renegade storms across east central, southeastern Pennsylvania, moving up through northwestern New Jersey. That's where the greatest bulk shear is expected. That's where the dew points, the surface dew points, could even be pushing 60 degrees. If we get about a 58, 59 dew point, that lifts up into northwestern New Jersey from those storms coming out of eastern, east central Pennsylvania, then I think that those will have the greatest threat of an isolated tornado or two. But a large 2% area that goes all the way to New York City, the short range models definitely fluff out those storms on approach to the Big Apple, but there is a chance with that increasing low level jet that they might be able to hold together until they get to New York City. So thank you everybody for tuning in to this live weather report. I may go live later on today if that tornado potential is realized across this zone, across portions of the Northeast. We break down severe weather. Doesn't matter where it happens. Northeast, Great Plains, Southeast, Western U.S., Pacific Northwest, Argentina, Canada. Worldwide, we try to break it down and chase it. So thank you everybody for tuning in to this live weather report. Definitely stay tuned because numerous severe weather days are on tap and possibly very impactful severe weather, especially Monday through Wednesday of next week. So thank you everybody again for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Saturday. And if I do go live again on that tornado threat later on this afternoon across the Northeast, be sure to sign up for notifications when I go live. I'm also going to be doing some live exclusive weather briefings for Facebook Facebook subscribers. Probably will do one of those tomorrow morning. So let's do an exclusive live Q&A tomorrow morning when we have the short range models that will be capturing both Monday and Tuesday's evolution. I want to get within the HRRR range within 48 hours of this event. Really tonight, the 0Z models will be the first time that happens. So thank you everybody for tuning in to this weather report. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Never stop chasing.